Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody that's joining us today. Happy World Rainforest Day. Wherever you are and whatever time zone you're in. It is my immense honor as CEO of Rainforest Partnership to come to you, to welcome you to the 6th day, and then invite you to listen to Steven Donziger and Shinae Gualinga as they come and speak to you and bring their stories. I want to welcome those of you who've been working on protecting rainforests and those who joining in this journey just right now. I want to welcome those of us who live and work on the front lines in rainforest communities around the world, and those of us who work for organizations protecting and conserving forests in some of the most critical biodiverse areas in the world. You know, every day from the Amazon to the Philippines, Indonesia to the DRC, and across the world's tropical rainforest, people are focused on protecting their lands, livelihoods, rights, and cultures, and working on safeguarding the future of life on this planet for generations and centuries to come. And people are organizing on the ground, mobilizing around the world, many at the front, at the forefront of this groundbreaking innovation and radically diverse and unprecedented collaborations that are coming about. I don't know about any of you, but what I have seen since the COP26 in Glasgow in November is a almost complete change in my 15 years of doing this work. The people are stepping forward and coming forward and joining those of us who've been doing this work. For me, it's okay, 15 years. For many others, it's far, far longer. And what it's doing is it's accelerating the pace and the attention the forests are getting. So World Rainforest Day is really a day of celebration and collaboration, knowledge sharing, connection, and innovation. And at its heart, we actually started it as an idea and as a day to focus people on celebrating these forests, to increase the level of knowledge and to engage and activate ever increasing numbers of people around the world. All of us learn about tropical rainforests, right? When we are in school, in middle schools, for a lot of people. It doesn't matter where you live in the world. These magical, beautiful ecosystems. And with incredible life in the most unique, beautiful way that nature could let it unfold. It's nature's best technologies. But we cannot overlook the utter seriousness of this work either. We've also got to recognize the gravity of our shared mission, the responsibility that we have, either that's being foisted on us, right? Or for many of us, we've chosen to take this on because for us, it's a calling. To act swiftly, strategically, collectively, to match the urgency. Because our forest is almost under assault. Our planet is almost under assault, right? Our forests are under assault. And what the UN tells us about the dual existential crisis of climate change and biodiversity loss. So even as World Rainforest Day is this day of celebration and elevating them for a day, these forests that have been around for so many years, it's how do we come together as a global community? It's how do we focus and not forget that it's our planet's natural technology that evolved over millennia. And the summit is about convening beyond borders and paywalls and time zones, right? Something that the gift of COVID, sadly, is that we've learned how to gather in virtual spaces. It's a very different thing. World Rainforest Day was always virtual for the first years. The world only caught up when the pandemic hit. And so the summit is about invitations, accessibility, creativity, community, opportunity, and solutions. And this year's theme, the time is now. It's dedicated to exploring the solutions we have right in front of us so that we can act, to scale and create the impact needed for our planet. And so here's the other thing. We can't be here just to talk. We can't be here to play nice. It's no longer the days of old when we gathered and sort of spent days hugging and enjoying each other and saying, how are we going to do what we're going to do? And we did that, and then we moved on and we forgot about things. We brought indigenous voices and forest guardians and people working on conservation, and we gave people a voice, put them on the stage, and it was almost like, okay, that was a check mark, and now we're going to move on and return back to life like we've done what we needed to do. It cannot be that anymore. It cannot be that we do a Facebook like for something and think we've done our part. It cannot be that we say we recycle, therefore we're an environmentalist. It cannot be that we care about forests because we know the name or the face of an indigenous leader, or we've visited a tropical rainforest as part of one of our vacations. It does not allow us that luxury anymore. Maybe in the 80s, maybe in the 90s or the aughts, perhaps in the early teens. So as we come together and realize and understand what the opportunity is of a day like World Rainforest Day, we're mobilizing for rainforest protection, creating this movement in defense of life and our collective future on this planet. And here's the thing, we were lonely voices in many ways, right? Many of us here know that. But something changed at COP26 in Glasgow when over 140 countries signed the Glasgow Leaders' Declaration on Forests and Land Use, recognizing the importance of protecting this natural technology, tropical rainforests, and committing to ending deforestation by 2030. Something shifted. There were funds and big banks that said, we got the signal. Now, here's the thing. It's one thing getting the signal, another to actually start moving in the right direction. It doesn't happen overnight, right? If you think about some of these institutions, very bureaucratic, right? They're like the Titanic. There's the iceberg. But you cannot move that fast. But here's the thing, we don't have that luxury. So who are we, and who is joining us today in coming together with us that are going to engage in creating solutions and raising the bar so that it's no longer a nice to do pastime, this work that we do. It's no longer about saving the rainforest, saving endangered species. It is about the planet saving essential work we're doing and bringing everybody along with us. Most of you know, forests are life itself, right? They create life, support vast diversity of life, and make life possible for every person and creature on this planet, regulating our climate, our water cycle, so much more. And if you think about it, there's no greater human right than the right to a livable, thriving planet that can sustain us all. And we know that forests are absolutely essential to secure this human right for all of us around the world. And before I say something else, think about for a moment, reflect what forests have done for us. Just think about it. It's the reason we see more shades of green than any other color. The greening of this planet is what created the ability for us to live on this planet as humans in our current form, right? And so How do we think and give back to these forests? How do we reflect on that? And for many of us here today, we're not strangers to the threats and risks of working in and for rainforest conservation. For many on the front lines, it's a stark reality of their daily lives. That merely living in and defending their land, way of life, or livelihood is inherently risky. So as we come together to celebrate and uplift rainforests and the guardians, let's also do it while we mourn the loss of Bruno Pereira and Dom Phillips. In the past 2 weeks, many of us have been transfixed, watching for news, hoping against what we know had happened. And, they made a lot of news. But they join a list of hundreds of others, many whose names we'll never know. Those who've died defending forests and the rights and livelihoods of rainforest communities. And it's not an isolated incident, you all know that. In 2021 alone, more than 180 land and environmental defenders were killed. And that's just the documented cases. In 2020, an indigenous activist was killed every other day in the Amazon. In 2019, 212. It's almost like, there is an attack on our forests and critical ecosystems and on the guardians of these sacred places. So today and every day, let us remember Bruno, Dom, and the many other brave journalists, indigenous leaders, scientists, community members, activists, teachers, park rangers, and all the land defenders who've lost their lives in the fight for this planet. And today and every day, let us recognize the critical role of indigenous peoples who live in and around forests on the front lines, dedicating their lives to protecting their ancestral lands and ecosystems that keep us all alive. I ask that everyone joining right now, join me in a moment of silence to honor Dom and Bruno and all those who lost their lives during this year. Thank you. Let us be compelled by their stories and their experiences and their sacrifice to power our ability to continue doing this work. World Rainforest Day. It's a moment every year to renew our commitment to protecting these forests and to re-energize ourselves and each other. And today we know that we cannot do what we must without bringing in the indigenous knowledge and the knowledge about our forests and bringing together the new technologies that make so much possible that wasn't possible even 5 years ago. All these emerging innovations. Let's sit with humility, come together, listen to each other, uplift, give voices to people who haven't been heard, so that we can protect, conserve, defend, and restore rainforests in a profound act of intergenerational care. Thank you to all of you that are joining today and being part of this journey and this movement. No matter who you are, no one of us is insignificant because every one of us matters. And it doesn't matter what your capital is. It can be money, knowledge, time, experience, ideas and innovations. Let's come together. Happy World Rainforest Day. And now it's my profound honor to invite Steven Donziger to come speak. Steven is a human rights lawyer, writer, and advocate for environmental justice and corporate accountability. I think I met Steven about 10 years ago, and then we hadn't seen or talked to each other. You were in Austin to speak at a forum at the law school at University of Texas many years ago, I think 2012. Steven has represented thousands of indigenous people in the Ecuadorian Amazon in a historic and groundbreaking case that ordered Chevron to pay $9.5 billion. And many of you know about this. And as a public figure and representative of the indigenous and environmental justice movements, he'd also become a target of a major oil company's ire. And that's had life-changing consequences. That's included losing his freedom and his way of life. Coming out of some of that just very recently. I do not want to put any words in Steven's mouth. I would like Steven to tell his story. But here's the one thing I will say, that he's remained an unfailing advocate and brings his powerful personal story and message to us. And I believe that he hasn't lost his resolve in defense of forests and forest people. And I think that's the thing for us today, that some of us now know that these are not lonely voices. And so, Steven, I welcome you to give voice to the forests and the indigenous people and the people that you've known and you represent. Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
I understand that Shinae is going to be able to join. I know, so we will bring her to speak up right after Steven.
Okay, thank you so much, Niyanta. It's an honor to be asked to participate in this great event. I'm going to talk briefly about my experience as a lawyer representing indigenous peoples in the Amazon alongside rural farmer communities who live in an area in Ecuador where Texaco, American oil company, now Chevron, drilled from roughly the 1960s to the early 1990s. And as part of their drilling process, they designed a system, engineered a system of oil extraction that was designed to deliberately dump billions of gallons of cancer-causing toxic waste onto indigenous ancestral lands, into fresh water sources like rivers and streams that communities relied on for their drinking water, for their fishing, for their bathing, and for their sustenance. And I first went down there in the early 1990s as a young lawyer and was just completely shocked at this apocalyptic scene of like lakes of oil gouged out of the jungle floor. The complete, utter disregard by the American oil companies for the people just blew my mind as a young lawyer. And I then, along with other lawyers, Ecuadorian lawyers, US lawyers, we launched a lawsuit which in 1993, which has now lasted almost 30 years. And I want to talk a little bit about that in reference to the importance of people around the world to actually take action, to help and to give voice and to give leverage to the frontline defenders of our planet, that is the indigenous peoples in the forest who do the hard work that benefits all the vital ecosystems on which life depends on this earth. So I have a little kind of, people talk about this big case and everything, but my experience is actually quite modest in the overall mosaic of the work that needs to be done. But it also provides, I think, some important lessons so that the work gets done effectively. So basically what happened to our case is over a period of several years, Texaco, then Chevron bought Texaco in 2001, poured massive resources into trying to suppress the voices of the indigenous peoples, to try to block them from actually entering the courthouse to pursue their pollution claims, which were decimating their cultures and which were actually killing people with cancer and other oil-related diseases. And as lawyers, we had to mobilize resources, donations, investment capital, any amount of resources we could find to be able to sustain the litigation over so many years, because their strategy was one of attrition. They thought if they could just fight us long enough and delay the case and sabotage the case, eventually we, the lawyers, we, the advocates, would disappear, go away, leaving the indigenous peoples defenseless relative to the pollution that was actually destroying their cultures and destroying their forest. So over time, we figured out a way to create an economic model behind the case to sustain it, to get lawyers in, to keep the case going in the face of the efforts by Chevron to delay and obstruct the process. And in 2011, the communities in Ecuador won a historic pollution judgment. Actually, at the time, it was about $18.5 billion. It was since cut in half on appeal, but the case was affirmed by the Supreme Court of Ecuador, the Constitutional Court of Ecuador, and also by the Supreme Court of Canada, where the people in Ecuador took their judgment because Chevron refused to pay it in an effort to collect Chevron's assets. The Canadian court affirmed the Ecuador court decision for purposes of foreign enforcement. In light of all of these legal successes, which were really, a result of this incredible collaboration between the rainforest communities and people around the world, including me and other lawyers, Chevron decided to target me and turn me into what I would call a vehicle of intimidation to try to get people not to do this critically important work. In a nutshell, they sued me back in the United States where I live. I live in Manhattan, although obviously I'm not in Manhattan right now, but I live in Manhattan. And they sued me there for the most amount of money any American citizen has ever been sued for. It was 60 billion US dollars. Billion, not million, billion. I'm a human rights lawyer. I live with my wife and son in a 2-bedroom apartment in Manhattan. I am not a person of great means in terms of money, although I feel so blessed to have the life I have. I don't have a lot of money. So they went after me, obviously not for my money. They knew I didn't have much. They went after me to try to disable my advocacy, silence the ability of all of us to do this work, and try to intimidate others, especially young people, into not even entering this field, not even doing the hard work that is so necessary to protect the rainforests around the world. And ultimately, we kept going. I contested the lawsuit. Chevron dropped all the money damages because they wanted to avoid a jury of impartial citizens, which you get in this country in a civil case. And a particular judge with financial ties to Chevron ruled against me, claimed that we had committed fraud in Ecuador to try to obtain the judgment, which I reject completely. And that decision also has been rejected by 6 different appellate courts, appeals courts around the world, including, again, the Supreme Courts of Ecuador and Canada. So you had this one U.S. trial judge at a very low level in New York trying to essentially work with Chevron's lawyers to destroy me. And ultimately, Chevron used 60 law firms and 2,000 lawyers in this demonization campaign. And we kept going and kept racking up court victories in other countries like Canada. They asked, Chevron got an order from this judge that I turn over my computer to Chevron with all the confidential information on it, communications with the clients in Ecuador, communications with other lawyers. And I had an ethical obligation to my clients not to turn over. They had the privilege over this information. And I appealed this decision by this judge to turn over my computer. And while it was on appeal, he charged me with criminal contempt of court for disobeying an order of his that I believed was unlawful and that it was on appeal. This is unprecedented. He then had me locked up in my home with an ankle bracelet. This was back on August 6, 2019. And that began a period of detention that did not end until April 25th of this year, about 2 months ago. I spent 993 days in detention. 45 of those days were in a federal prison in Connecticut, the U.S. state of Connecticut, as supposed punishment for fighting for the people in the rainforest who have been attacked by Chevron, this American oil company. And I'm a lawyer who went to Harvard Law School. Not that that means anything other than to tell you that it's not like I'm coming at this from some radical place. I am a regular lawyer who cares about environmental issues in the United States of America. And this happened to me. Worse, the federal prosecutor, the entity in New York that prosecutes crime, refused to prosecute me for this supposed charge, which I reject. It's not a crime what I did. It's good lawyering. So the judge appointed a private corporate law firm to prosecute me in the name of the United States government. And this law firm, the judge never disclosed this at the beginning, but we later found out that this law firm had Chevron as its client, as its private client. Essentially, Chevron prosecuted me in the first corporate prosecution in U.S. history, and maybe in world history, because I've never seen this before in any other country. So I tell this story to tell you that the fossil fuel industry, when it looks at rainforests, doesn't much care about the survival of forests as long as they can extract the resources they need from forests so they can continue to make their enormous profits. I mean, you might know that now oil companies are making more profits than ever, and they're using the Ukraine war as an excuse to try to lock in drilling for another 20 years in a way that will lead to climate disaster and the disaster for our forests. So my lesson from all of this is that the change needed to protect the forests, and the change needed to protect the frontline defenders of the forests, the indigenous peoples, has to come from a global citizen-led grassroots effort. Generally speaking, there's very few governments in the world that will do the hard work necessary to protect the forests without citizens forcing governments to change their policies and act. They're just not going to do it because the power of industry is so strong. Its influence, for example, in the United States over governmental policy is so strong that unless we build a countervailing force at the most fundamental grassroots level, I don't think the forests are going to be able to survive. I mean, the stakes could not be higher. If the forests do not survive, our vital ecosystems fail. In life, we're already seeing this to some degree, life begins to deteriorate and ultimately end as we know it. So I would urge everyone to find a way to enter this battle on the front lines if you can. I would urge young people in particular, if you're in college, in high school, or trying to figure out what path you want to chart, to get involved and do this work on the front lines. Indigenous peoples who live in the forest, who protect it for all of us, need our support. Okay, I've been to Ecuador 250 or more times over the course of 20 years in the forest. And I cannot tell you how much the industry and even the governments of these countries, Brazil, Ecuador, Peru, Colombia, Venezuela, talking about the Amazon forest, want to not amplify the voices of the people most affected, the most important people on the planet who do the hardest work to protect nature, to protect life. I'm humbled as an American lawyer to have been able to play a modest role in trying to help particular indigenous peoples in Ecuador. And by the way, the indigenous peoples are the Siona, the Kofan, the Sequoia, the Waorani, and the Quechua, as well as rural farmer communities who collaborate with them. That is rural communities in the Amazon, people who came to the Amazon from other parts of Ecuador who also are directly impacted and are dying from this awful contamination that Chevron deliberately dumped into the forest. So we have a lot of work to do. My experience, I think, is a great example of how much you can accomplish. Because one thing I want to leave with everyone is I was attacked and I was detained illegally, in my opinion, because of our success, because of this incredible alliance between the people of the forest and their allied lawyers in the north and other allies around the world who understand the importance of this work. And, they tried to shut me up. Let me be clear about Chevron and their judicial allies, tried to silence me. They failed. They have failed. I am here. I am not changing. I am continuing to speak. And I am continuing to do the work to the extent possible. Okay? There are other lawyers, to be clear, involved in this case beyond me who also are doing the work. It's not just about one person. It never is. Okay? It's always about collaboration. It's always about team building. But I can tell you their attempt to use me as some example of intimidation is not working. And I am getting asked, like this event where I'm honored to be asked to speak and participate. I'm being asked to talk to people all over the place, Amnesty International groups and environmental conferences all over the world, because people want to hear this story and they want to hear that the stakes are high, but the work can be done and it can be done successfully. We just have to remember to take that first step and start, and don't let them convince us we cannot succeed in doing this work. They try to get in our heads by attacking people, to demoralize people. And no. Look at every attack as an opportunity to turn the tables and move this campaign, this movement forward so we can save our precious earth. So I'll stop there. I could talk forever about this experience, but I just want people to know the work can be done. Please get involved. Nothing less than life itself is at stake. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steven, for that incredibly powerful message. And I think if people were not sure, did it break you? What did it do? Here you are, your resolve strengthened, and finding hope in the next generation, in collaboration, and really for life itself, as you said, our planet, forests are life itself. And the best guardians are those that are living at the forefront of these forests. So with that, I don't know if I'm going to ask permission. We're going to listen and hear from Shinae. But after that, if there is chance, I would love to have the two of you together. We'll see, because perhaps people will give us the excuse if there isn't anything on the main stage after. But I want to introduce Shinae Gualinga, our next keynote speaker. She's a youth leader from the Quechua community of Sarayaku in the heart of the Ecuadorian Amazon. Many of you have heard about Sarayaku. It's well known for its long history of resistance to extraction and exploitation in the community and across the Amazon. And by the way, the women of Sarayaku, they've been at the forefront, some powerful leaders. I got to meet both Nina and Helena Gualinga, cousins to Shinae, just in the last month. And some of them are related to our partner community of Sani Isla, another Quechua community that we, Rainforest Partnership, have worked with for many years. What I'm seeing is it's a young people, and Shinae represents the best of that. She co-founded Likchari, an organization led by indigenous youth created to bring support and resources to the communities. She's an activist and leader who's shared her story and that of her community globally, advocating for the rights, lives, lands, and livelihoods of her people, and for all the indigenous communities in the Amazon and around the world. Respected as she is, let's hear Shinae in her own words.
Muy buenas tardes. En nombre de mi pueblo de Sarayaku, reciban un cordial saludo. Mi nombre es Shinae Gualinga. Soy del pueblo originario quechua de Sarayaku, ubicado en el centro sur de la región amazónica. Soy una joven que defiende los derechos de la naturaleza. Actualmente formo parte del Consejo de Gobierno de Taija Saruta, específicamente colaborando en áreas de conservación de nuestro territorio. Quiero agradecer a la organización Rainforest Partnership por invitarme a ser parte de este maravilloso cumbre por el Día Mundial de Selvas Tropicales, que es un espacio importante para debatir y explorar soluciones de conservación. A continuación, voy a hablar acerca de mi pueblo Sarayaku, la lucha y cómo conservamos nuestro territorio y la selva viviente que es nuestra propuesta de vida. El pueblo de Sarayaku lleva 42 años de vida organizativa desde la Constitución Jurídica de Sarayaku. A lo largo de este proceso organizativo hemos impulsado una lucha y resistencia inalcanzable en el fortalecimiento de la organización social, política, cultural, ambiental, educativa para mejorar el summa causae, que es el buen vivir de nuestros pueblos y de otras nacionalidades. El territorio de Sarayaku cuenta aproximadamente con 135,000 hectáreas. El 95% es bosque primario, con una alta biodiversidad. Como pueblo de Sarayaku protegemos nuestra selva porque es el espacio de vida de los seres de la naturaleza, desde lo más pequeño hasta el ser más grande y supremo, incluyendo también el mundo animal, vegetal, mineral y hasta lo cósmico. Para nosotros, la selva es el espacio de vida. Con ella nosotros nos conectamos y nos interrelacionamos. Pero la selva es víctima por la tala de árboles, por incendios y extractivismo. Con la pérdida de los bosques o selvas desaparecen plantas, animales e incluso vidas humanas, afectando directamente al equilibrio de la naturaleza. Nuestro deber y derecho es proteger grandes extensiones de la biodiversidad como pueblo de Sarayaku para conservar nuestro territorio nuestra selva, tenemos la propuesta de Causaxacha, selva viviente, que consiste en preservar los espacios territoriales, la relación espiritual con los seres que habitan en la selva viviente, declarando estos territorios sagrados zona libre de contaminación, zonas libres de toda actividad de explotación extractiva de recursos naturales, dejando el petróleo bajo tierra. Como pueblo de Sarayaku, hemos enfrentado a las empresas extractivas y al gobierno ecuatoriano. Y también hemos ganado una sentencia a nuestro favor, declarando un territorio libre de toda actividad de explotación extractiva por parte de la Corte Interamericana de Derechos Humanos. Sin embargo, la lucha continúa hasta asegurar que nunca se repita la amenaza del petróleo sobre el pueblo de Sarayaku y nuestros derechos, así como también los territorios de los pueblos y nacionalidades a nivel de nuestro país, Ecuador. Frente a la conservación de la selva o bosques tropicales, el Estado ecuatoriano protege según los derechos de la naturaleza consagrados en la Constitución. Pero estos derechos son violentados por parte del Estado, dedicando a la explotación de los recursos naturales, sin consulta previa a los pueblos originarios, dejando en devastación total la vida de la naturaleza. En este momento, mi país se encuentra en un enfrentamiento entre el gobierno y la sociedad civil, pueblos, nacionalidades, campesinos, estudiantes y entre otros, por medidas económicas y por la ampliación de la frontera extractiva minera y también los impactos socioambientales. La dura realidad en la que estamos viviendo en un país cuyas leyes e instituciones perpetúan las violaciones de los derechos fundamentales de la naturaleza y la del ser humano. Como jóvenes de Sarayaku, defensores de la naturaleza, rechazamos cualquier tipo de actividad que dañe nuestra selva, que contribuye a la regulación del ciclo del carbono y del cambio climático. Para ello, hemos estado vinculados en la lucha y resistencia frente a una globalización eminente, practicando la cosmovisión de mi pueblo, que es preservar y proteger la sacha, que es selva, nuestro hogar, ríos y tierra, los cuales sostienen la infinidad de especies faunísticos y florísticos trascendental para nuestra existencia. La selva tropical es para los pueblos indígenas la vida. Sin territorio, los pueblos indígenas perderíamos la identidad, espiritualidad y la cosmovisión. Quiero invitar a todos los que por este medio me están escuchando la voz, la ideología, la resistencia del pueblo de Sarayaku, más que todo a los jóvenes. El cambio climático es real. Está sucediendo ahora. Es la amenaza más urgente. Y como jóvenes lo estamos viviendo en carne propia. Necesitamos trabajar unidos para proteger la selva tropical. Por el Día Internacional de la Selva Tropical es compromiso de todos proteger nuestro hogar, porque es el último recurso que nos queda para de esta manera nosotros poder llegar a ideas de vivir en armonía con la naturaleza, por sobre todo que los grandes gobiernos y empresas mineras extractivas que nos escuchen la ideología de los pueblos originarios, la ideología de cada joven y de cada niño que desea tener un futuro digno, un futuro para ellos y un futuro para nosotros y para toda la sociedad humana, animal y vegetal. Nosotros como pueblo de Sarayaku, para defender nuestros territorios, hemos realizado, realizamos monitoreos, vigilancias a nuestros linderos como parte fundamental para la conservación de nuestra selva. Y para finalizar, quiero agradecer nuevamente a estas organizaciones que han hecho posible para que este evento se desarrolle y también por ser parte de este proceso que conlleva a cambiar la ideología de las personas, la ideología para el bien común. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much for bringing your words, for sharing your cosmovision, for how for you there is no separation between what is the forest and who you are. That what you, as young people and as community of Sarayaku, what you're doing, how you're bringing your voices into this global stage and sharing with us from the forest in your own words. And so this World Rainforest Day, I thank all of you for joining us and listening to Steven bring his powerful message as somebody from the West, a lawyer, a human rights lawyer. Shinae is a young Ecuadorian activist, still living in the forest in her community, having found her voice. But we connected with them and they connected with us. And I think if we remember that and we start behaving more like one human family, protecting this one planet, that's our only home. Guess what? I don't want to go to Mars. There are no trees, there are no forests, there are no people. I'd rather be here, work on protecting this, our planet. So thank you. Thank you to Steven, thank you to Shinae, and thank you to all of you. Stay on, go listen to the music. 33 musicians created music just for World Rainforest Day from 22 countries. First time we did that. Films from around the world, all 6 populated continents. Go watch them, go join the sessions. Figure out what is your story, what is your path in protecting our tropical rainforests. And thank you for joining us today. Happy World Rainforest Day.